This podcast is brought to you by PLI, the Practising Law Institute, providing resources to legal professionals and the law librarian community. For more information, go to pli.edu/librarian.
Hi, I'm Karen Osterly. Thanks for listening. As a practicing law librarian myself, I've been working in the legal information profession for 36 years, currently with PLI's Library Relations team. Josh LaPorte and I are discussing changes in law librarianship, the evolving role of technology and artificial intelligence in legal research and in teaching, and the importance of mentorship, adaptability, and accessibility in library services. Josh speaks of his unconventional path to law librarianship and advocates creative solutions in training new staff who may have little experience, ensuring that staffing remains relevant in an increasingly digital environment. Come join us. Welcome, Josh. Thank you for joining me today.
I'm so happy to be here, Karen. Thank you for inviting me.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure. Tell me your exact title and the exact name of the court.
Yes, I'm the supervisory librarian here at the United States Court of International Trade.
And you've been there how long?
Not very long. I came over in April.
Oh.
So I had worked in law school libraries for 20 years, and this is a big shift. So it's been really exciting.
I didn't realize it had been almost 6 months already. That's pretty wild. I would have guessed like June, maybe July.
Yeah. No.
And you were at St. John's 20 years?
No. I was at St. John's for a few years. And prior to St. John's, I was at Boston University School of Law. Oh. And prior to BU, I was at UConn School of Law in Hartford for about 13 years.
Wow.
So,
did you go to UConn? Have you been in? Were you in stores all that time?
No. I'm from Hartford originally. This all happened very accidentally. I'd worked in libraries from my first jobs as a teenager. After undergrad, I went to work as a community organizer for 3 years, which I loved, but my grant ran out, and there was an entry-level part-time position open at UConn Law as a library assistant, and I just needed something to do for a while, so I got hired into that. I also got another full-time job working as a cataloger for a library contracting company, and started working, and then UConn hired me full-time a year later, and I've just worked up the ranks. I've done everything, so it's been a great journey.
Excellent. So stores, and then Boston, and then New York City. The only place after here is LA.
I don't ever want to leave New York City.
Okay.
I love New York.
Me too.
So it was interesting when I went to library school relatively recently. I delayed it for a really long time. And when I finished, one of my greatest mentors is Darcy Kirk, who I worked for many years at UConn. She was one of my biggest cheerleaders and mentors and advocates. And she reached out to me. There's a job at a court library in Rhode Island that she thought would be a really good fit for me. And I was thinking, the court part sounds really interesting, but I don't want to move out of New York.
Yeah.
And I bought a co-op out in Queens about a year ago. I was very settled. I like living here. But that made me start to think, I'm like, what about courts here? There's a lot of courts here.
Right.
And so that's sort of what got me on the track, that I found the posting here and I came in to interview, and Taryn is wonderful. And
yes.
This has been a great place to learn, and just there's a lot of parallels to what I experienced working in law schools. And of course, legal research is legal research.
Right.
We're very specialized here. So it's going from being very much a generalist to being a very narrowly focused legal researcher has been a big adjustment, but it's actually been really a pleasure.
Good.
Rather than feeling like I'm dabbling in everything, just to kind of really hone in and get really learn a certain area really deeply.
The funny thing, U.S. Court of International Trade was in the news not that long ago, not something you guys probably ever expected. And it's not, I learned from Taryn, you guys don't do what one would think you do. A bystander, a civilian, Court of International Trade, they must sit on international trade cases. No. Not the case. Tell us what USCIT does.
Yeah, well, I mean, I encourage listeners to listen to Taryn's episode of this podcast because I think she really explained it well. But the United States Court of International Trade, we deal with federal law exclusively. It's all trade and customs matters. And so, yeah, we were in the news right after I came to the court. I was immediately pulled into that research. I can't talk too much about it, but it was I think it was an amazing moment for me to really test my skills, and I feel like I was quite successful, but also really identified what I needed to learn. And that has set me up really well. Rather than being a slow process, it was a
trial by fire.
And right now, it's like we've got a lot to cover. And also, Taryn has been really generous with giving me, just letting me take lead on things. She's always there to backstop, but I think she really wanted me to get up to speed quickly and feel comfortable to handle whatever the judges need here. So,
excellent. And I'm sure you have. But yeah, talk about trial by fire.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. It was a special moment. So
okay, so it's interesting to me because I did the same thing. I got my law librarian degree, my LIS, 25 years after I got my MBA. So I had worked all those years in legal publishing, and then got the LIS, and now I became a librarian. But you were working as a law librarian all that time without the degree. You didn't need it?
I probably did. I think some of this was circumstance, and some of it was some really amazing people who I worked for, who had, I think, a very open mind to the idea of, we never even articulated it this way, but just that you could apprentice, that you can learn the skills. So when I started working in law libraries, there was still what I consider to be a lot of entry-level work.
Right.
We still had a lot of print. I shelved books. I wrote item records for law review issues that we received. I assisted with bindery preparation, things like that. That's just start to get you involved. And then I started to learn loose leaf filing. And then I started to learn bound volume continuations. And then, just sort of, and so it kind of gave me this opportunity to keep layering. But another special circumstance was I was at the University of Connecticut, and the state of Connecticut was rolling through many budget issues at that time. So we were regularly under hiring freezes, budget rescissions. And what that meant for me was that there were a lot of times that the person who would normally do the work wasn't there.
Right.
The position was unfilled.
Right.
And I was always like,
yeah,
I'd love to learn that.
Yeah.
And someone needed to do it. So it gave me a lot of opportunities that I think in a more classical sense I wouldn't have been offered.
Right.
But it let me keep learning. And I also, as I mentioned, I worked with both laterally and with people above me who were really willing to mentor me and help me learn the skills and answer all my questions and engage with me about the intellectual issues that underlie the decisions that we make. And so when I finally did go to library school, I did learn things, but a lot of what I learned was how library instruction is taught. And what do I think about that? Because most of the hard skill set I had gleaned over many years of doing the work. Right. And I think it also, I don't know if you encountered anything like this yourself, but that when I was finally a librarian, I've done all the things. That it's very unusual that there's a new problem that I haven't encountered before and actually hands-on done the work
to
in
resolve.
20 years. Right. So, and even before the 20 years, there were all those years, all through undergrad, I worked in the library. When I was a high school student, I worked in the library. So most things that happen, I've seen it before. And that I sometimes notice with some of my colleagues who, especially people who have a JD and an MLIS degree, often sort of skip some of that entry-level work and end up directly in a higher level of work where they're directing the operation but haven't necessarily done it. And so that's, and I don't want to sound like I'm disparaging towards that at all. I think that either way is fine, but I think it helps me. I understand what the people who report to me, I understand what their work looks like, and I've done it myself.
You've done it.
And I feel pretty comfortable to step in and do it. I also am very aware of the parts of it that I'm not good at because I've done it before. And so that I think helps me when I'm sort of selecting new hires, when I'm coaching people, evaluating. I know which parts of the work are really difficult, the sort of unexpectedly complicated nature of some of the base work. So.
There is no quick and easy for this one.
Right. It's just a mess. It's just a mess. Yep. And also when I worked at St. John's, my 2 library assistants did a lot of the work on course reserves, and they were encountering a lot of frustration with no matter how careful you are, students suddenly are arriving at the desk looking for things that we don't have.
Right.
And I just, when they would be frustrated by this, I was able to reassure them so thoroughly, like, absolutely not. Like, you are fine. You like
this happens.
You can't make this perfect. Believe me, I spent 15 years of my life trying to engineer all the problems out of it. It's not possible.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't get to do that, but I did. So when the pandemic hit and everything was closed, I started going in because I was comfortable, driving in myself. I was practically the only one in the building, certainly the only one for several floors. And our tech services people were remote. Mm-hmm. And so I got to learn tech services, or got to at least learn the cataloging part of it, and the, spine labels, and fixing stuff that had just been, because Niley keeps archival copies. So I think it might have been Wright and Miller. There's 3 or 4 editions, and everything in the past, everything had just been thrown up, under the first edition or the second edition, whatever came up quickly for whoever was doing that, before us, a long time before. So I was able to really figure it out with the help of Eileen Dolan, who was, again, very patient and on the phone and on Zoom and helped me learn that. So that was very cool. I never expected to have an opportunity to learn about tech services.
Yeah.
So that was, so I'm empathizing with what you get to do over those years. So that's very interesting. But I feel a little bit the same way about library school, because I had been with Matthew Bender and Lexis. Let's see, I started school in 2006, started with Bender in 89. I think that's 27 years. Yeah. So I'd been in law libraries. I'd been, government law libraries, academic law libraries, county law libraries, a lot of firms. So when there's, a course I'm taking on secondary sources, I sort of knew something about that.
Right. Yeah.
But a lot of it was new. Like the cataloging course was new, and building your website. Again, this is 2006 to 2011. But that was very interesting. So very cool. Very cool that you came to it late, but you've been working since high school in libraries.
Yeah.
Excellent. So since you began in the law library field, talk to me about the changes you've seen.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the big change that I've seen is just I've mostly worked in academics, but they still have print collections, but not nearly as much as they did 20 years ago. At one point, I think I was managing a 300 title loose leaf collection. I don't know if anybody has a 300 title loose leaf collection. I don't even know if there are 300 loose leaf titles to subscribe to now. So I think, though, that the interesting thing about that change is that there isn't as much of that entry-level work anymore.
Right.
I feel like it's harder to bring on a person who's not very familiar with libraries, but demonstrates attention to detail and fastidiousness, and good customer service. Those are the three things I always look for.
Right.
I used to be able to bring someone like that in and start to train them and start to kind of develop out. I had a lot of work that they could gain mastery and then go to the next step and then go to the next step.
Right.
We don't have as much of that. It's shifted. And I've had to get a little bit more creative about thinking about what the future looks like and what we might need. I rewrote all of the job descriptions when I worked at Boston University in the Access Services department to start to kind of think through that process of how we had job descriptions that were written for access services circa 2005. And what would these look like in 2030? Right. And we were in a great position. It was a big department, and because we were open a lot of hours and there needed to be staff there for all of the hours we were open, that sort of guaranteed that the positions would exist even though the work had changed.
Right.
And so just reflecting so I've got this person for 35 hours. I don't need them to spend 35 hours doing bindery prep anymore.
Right.
But what does it look like now? And so it was also during COVID. So there was the build out we were also one of the first academic law libraries that was back in person. So we opened up our interlibrary loan office. We started supplying
all kinds
libraries
of people
all over the country. People didn't have access to their print collections, and we did. And so we were scanning a lot. That created opportunities to create a position that actually manages the scanning workflow.
Right.
And, training student workers on scanning and quality control and managing files and managing requests. And so just thinking about how the work changes. It's been interesting coming to the courts because I think that here things seem a little bit more frozen. There don't seem to have been quite as many seismic shifts, or maybe they happened a long time ago. But thinking about the same thing, sort of looking at, we have really talented people here, and I've just had a very open eye towards, as I'm figuring out what are we doing, why are we doing, and then raising the question with Taryn about is this really something that we need to continue to do, or is this a legacy service that we've just always provided it, and do we need to keep doing that?
Right. Just like you were saying, I was writing down your questions. What does the future look like? What does the future of this position or this task look like?
Right.
So that's very interesting. That's very interesting that you're doing some of that forecasting, if you will. Can you talk about some library tools that you created at any of your different jobs and how those were used by the patrons?
I think this question just makes me think. I am a cataloger at heart. That I mentioned it briefly earlier. When I first came back to library work after community organizing, I got a very entry-level job on a copy cataloging project. We were doing a retrospective conversion of a school library in Brookline, Massachusetts. It was very rote, tedious work that, I was supposed to get 20 records processed an hour.
Wow.
And you just move. But there too, I worked with people who they saw that I was interested and diligent. And so as that project came to completion, they started to train me on more complicated work and started to be deployed on all sorts of cataloging projects, doing original cataloging and complicated serials work. But I think when I think about the tools, it's not so much that I created some special thing, but it's the always applying the attention to the base library systems to try to make them as intuitive and easy as possible for both the user and for my library colleagues who use the tool. So the catalog, our signage around the library, the layout of the collection in the stacks, trying to ensure that the electronic resource version is easy to discover and easy to discern what you're looking at and what the coverage is. All of that's a lot of back-end work that's very kind of unsexy.
But essential.
But it is essential.
Back
and
office.
I think, yes, it's back office. I used to work with, she's now passed, Barbara Plant was the cataloger at UConn Law School for a very long time. And she always would say, technical service is a public service.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really true, and something really important to keep in mind, that there is no bifurcation. We are across the board.
Well, because reference can't do their work without you.
Right.
I mean,
right.
And the patrons can't find anything without you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or check it out or take it home.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think, though, at all the libraries I worked at, even I was never titled as a technical services librarian at any of them, but I worked very extensively with my technical services colleagues to really smooth out that where the user interacts with the database and how does it work, and reporting the problems and figuring out solutions. And I think a lot about that feels like something that users of the library use every day. They don't really notice it unless it's not working correctly.
Exactly.
So
it's true. You mentioned a few minutes ago that USCIT, and maybe it's the courts or maybe it's yours, didn't seem to have gone through the changes as quickly as maybe law schools did or law firms. So I'm going to ask, are you guys using AI?
We are using AI in a very limited context. So the federal courts are evaluating AI tools, and I don't really feel like I'm able to speak to that very much. But what I'm doing, because Taryn and I do pretty extensive research training with our law clerks and with our interns here at the court. People come, even if they have pretty sophisticated legal research skills out of law school, our subject matter is so specialized.
Right.
The likelihood that they really know the ins and outs is slim. So we do a lot of research training, and actually our judges participate very heavily in that training too, which is really wonderful for the law clerks. But Taryn and I have folded in a lot of guidance on use of AI, sort of the caveats. I saw really interesting, my really close friend of mine is a librarian at a school in Hawaii, and she was doing a diversity audit on her collection. And one of the things that she's keeping in mind, paying attention to, is whether authors are representing diverse
populations.
Right. So there was an author, and she was wondering if this person was queer. And she said one of the ways that, if it's not obvious, that she tends to look at that is she will run searches like author name partner, author name wife, author name husband. And she said Google Gemini, she put in a female author's name with wife, and Google Gemini returned this result that said that this author is a woman and therefore she doesn't have a wife.
Huh. Couldn't possibly.
Couldn't possibly. And I was just, and like, so when I asked her to send me the screenshot of that because I want it for my training slides, just for the bias question. Like,
exactly.
That AI is trained on sources that contain bias, and that bias will come through with their results. And that's not the end of the world, but you just need to be mindful. You have to know. So yeah, that's a lot of, while the courts decide how they want to use AI, or if they want to use AI, or if they can afford to use AI, I think that the big thing that I'm trying to make sure is that our law clerks, our users here at the court, are well equipped to understand how to use the tool. I think a lot of Jennifer Chapman up at University at Buffalo just wrote, AI can't make soup. Did you read that article?
No.
Oh, it's fantastic. I absolutely recommend it. She wrote that when she went to culinary school, she was trained that, that the knife is a tool. The knife can chop your ingredients, but the knife cannot make soup. And she said, AI, if someone had gone into the kitchen and chopped all the vegetables that you need for your soup, but also chopped soap and also chopped poisonous mushrooms,
And sponges and stuff.
Right. You would need you need to use your discernment and your research skills to, like, maybe you can figure out, oh, this is a sponge, so we're going to remove that. I mean, this is soap, we're going to remove that. But when you get to the mushrooms, figuring out, are these safe to eat or not, you would have to do some research to figure that out.
Right.
So the tool did its job, and you still have yours to do.
Right. Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
That's very nice.
It's on the RIPS blog, I believe.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I know that one. I read that one. And well, that was part of my question. I was going to say, how are you guys using AI in research? And you've just spoken of that. And then I was going to ask, how are you using AI in teaching? And you're doing the same thing. You're teaching them research skills. Are you using AI in other areas, other ways?
I am trying to use it more myself. I'm always a little reluctant to fold new tools into my wheelhouse. I remember, like, when Twitter came out, I was very reluctant to use it. But then when I finally did, I was all in. I loved Twitter until recently. So I feel like I like to write. So a lot of the things that my friends tell me that they like about ChatGPT are less useful for me, because the process of word crafting is something I enjoy doing.
Right.
And I'm not the best at it, but I like it.
You like it, and that makes the AI tool less appealing.
Exactly. What I have been using tools like ChatGPT for is when I work in a lot of spreadsheets, and when I need to do formulas and they are getting complicated, sometimes I don't really know what the technical term for what I'm trying to do is. So using Excel help isn't helpful. Right. But I can just say to ChatGPT, like, I need to take all of I need to structure this spreadsheet data to do this. And it explains very clearly what to do. And it's often iterative. I think that this is sort of the way of using these tools, is that you try what they do, and it sort of did what you needed, but not quite. Right. So then I would go back and say, well, actually, I needed it all on the same row or something. And then it tells you sort of the next steps. And then I came to one when I was still at St. John's that I was doing this, and it just wasn't doing what I wanted. And then it just was like, okay, let's just start over.
Yeah, you could do that.
So I think that I'm really interested. So, I mean, I'm a disabled person, and I'm really interested in how tools like AI could help me or help somebody with a different disability. Something I don't know if it's possible, because I'm not an AI thinker. But if you've ever used a screen reader on a website to read the screen to you as it would to a visually impaired person, that's a pretty miserable experience, especially because our websites have become very image heavy.
Yeah, it's true.
The things that we've done to make things more appealing to seeing people makes it harder for non-seeing people to interpret. And I was really interested, like, could an AI tool look at, say, a photograph of a wall with graffiti and be able to actually unpack the layers of that? Like, what is it looking at? What does the graffiti say?
Right.
What material is the wall made out of? That, like, could the user interact with the AI to ask for more details that could make images come to life for a blind person? I don't know if that's possible, but those are the kinds of things that I think about that would be really cool. Yeah. If we could use these tools to make the world work better for all of us, because we all have
differently. We're all differently abled.
Yes, we're all differently abled. We all have our superpower, and we all have our blind spots. So, yeah.
That is really interesting. Wow. Okay. Thank you. Now, since you were at schools for so long, and since you were at schools until pretty recently, can I ask how St. John's is using AI in teaching and research and other ways?
So Courtney Selby, who I worked for at St. John's, who is amazing. I felt so privileged to work with her. And so, but Courtney, as soon as ChatGPT became a thing, Courtney was looking at it. And I wasn't directly involved in the 4-credit instructional work at St. John's, but they started to incorporate AI into their research training with students immediately. And the big thing, I think Courtney's approach to this was, after conducting the research in the traditional ways that we would have done it pre-AI,
Right.
with the class, then open it up on Lexis AI and ask the question and see what it offers you.
See what else you get.
And I really adopted that approach myself in my work, especially at the law school. So if a student came to the reference desk with a research question, I would do it the way that I always do it. And I am a Bender person from start to finish. If there's a Bender set on that topic, I'm very happy. So I loved the one that was really interesting was and this was a couple years ago, so I'm sure that the tools have evolved, but a student came to the desk and had a question about whether insurance policies in the state of Delaware were required to indemnify for punitive damages. So I'm like, okay, this is an insurance question. We are going to open up Appleman and see. And of course, Appleman had in the index brought us to a very succinct section that answered that question with citations perfectly. Right. Great. So I gave that to the student. We walked through it together. They left. They were happy. Right. After they walked away from the desk, I toggled over to the AI tool in Lexis and typed the question. Mm-hmm. And the return on that came to substantially the correct answer, but did it by consulting Corbin on contracts, which I thought was not outside the realm of reasonable, but also
nothing you would have expected.
Nothing I would have expected. And I think maybe that's also the utility from my perspective of these, right, is when they can suggest something that you wouldn't have chanced upon because it's so outside,
right,
the way that we've, we get grooved like a record of how to answer these questions. Right. I had one, I think, that was about evidentiary hearings. And after I'd done the same sort of process, after I'd done everything in the traditional ways, I consulted LibGuides, I consulted treatises, mm-hmm, I did some free searches in the web and in the databases, and afterwards I put it in Lexis's AI tool. I don't want to keep picking on Lexis, but
no, it's all right.
Lexis was the one that was always my go-to. And they offered up the Magistrate Judge's Handbook, which I never would have thought of, but was absolutely perfect. That's what magistrate judges do. Yep. And so that was a great addition. I never would have found it on my own. Right. Maybe I would have, but it wouldn't have, in the sort of academically structured way that I approach these things. I don't think that I would have seen that, because academics don't pay much attention to what magistrate judges do.
There's very little overlap.
Right. So it's powerful. And I think that it's, Mary Matusik's sort of following of all of the hallucinations that have been occurring is a cautionary tale. But I do think that the analogy to AI can't make soup, but it can chop vegetables is just something I will keep going back to. Yep.
So you have given me a new view, because you're talking about unexpected results, unexpected valuable information that you and I, experienced research librarians, mm-hmm, wouldn't have thought of. Right. So that's very interesting. Let me ask you, as long as we're on St. John's PLI, because that's the last time I had seen you, we came out to St. John's and did a presentation. How did you guys as librarians use PLI at St. John's?
I don't feel like we used PLI at St. John's very much, so PLI, when I worked at UConn, we were open to the public. Okay. And we had a lot of PLI loose leaves. Okay. And those were enormously useful so I was the evening manager for years, and I would... we were open to the public. I don't think that they are nearly as open to the public now as they, I feel like when CJ Pippins was on this podcast, he spoke about that too, that when I worked there, the doors were open and part of our mission was to serve the people of the state of Connecticut. And I had a sense of duty and responsibility around that. So people would come in after work, after the reference staff had gone home for the day, and they needed to find things. And I found many of the PLI titles were a really good tool for that kind of user. The person who's much too advanced for the no-low press,
right?
But
or even the nutshells,
right? Exactly. And so, I think that I don't remember if we were newly subscribing to PLI at St. John's when you came to do the training.
That could be.
I think it might have been a new product.
Okay.
And we had not yet really formally folded it into the use cases. The thing that I will say I missed working at St. John's. So St. John's is a small library, and I had come from BU Law School, which was a very robust library. And we had all of you had
everything.
Sophisticated, we subscribed to everything, and we also had the discovery tools to help you find it.
Excellent.
So, and I'm sure you felt this before when you're on the reference desk and the person asks you a question that's so out of your purview that your mind kind of goes white and you're not really thinking very critically about, you're just sort of in this moment of panic. Like, what do I do to get
what
this
do we
started?
have? Right.
Like, where can I even start? So at St. John's, our catalog, our tools for discovery were very bifurcated. We had sort of the electronic resources in one universe and our print resources in the other. Right. And there was overlap, but it wasn't as robust as it would have been at a library that had a larger staff that had more resources to put to that use. So I think I loved having a powerful, unified discovery tool because, especially in the law school where you don't know, you could be asked about any kind of legal research.
Right.
And that's where you discover things like your PLI subscriptions, because there's records in the system that direct you to them.
Right.
So when you're doing a subject search or just a keyword search or whatever, that they come up and then, oh yeah, that's right. This is a great tool for that.
Right.
And so.
Federated search.
Federated search, yes.
Well, was Ron there yet? Ron Wheeler?
Yeah.
And you were, okay. I couldn't remember when he started there. So you've been blessed with great bosses. You've had Ron and you've had Courtney.
Yes.
And Barbara that you mentioned, whom I didn't know, but I know these other ones. And no, Courtney and I go way back to when she was in Tulsa, because I used to live in Tulsa. And so when we met at Denver at one of the Bender baby dinners, like the first time we were in Denver at WLL years ago. And then she came to New York. Which was wild. Never expected to see her on this coast. And she's become, like you, a real New Yorker.
She has, definitely. Yeah. And actually, I met Courtney. She interviewed and was a finalist for a position at UConn Law when I was there.
Wow.
But it was around the same time that she ended up at Hofstra.
Oh, so, interesting.
Yeah,
interesting.
So I had met her a while back and she knocked my socks off then. So I've been very blessed to I have had some amazing people to work for and also just wonderful colleagues. Every library I've worked at, I've had wonderful colleagues, and that's how I've gotten to where I am.
That's terrific.
It doesn't happen on its own.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't happen on its own, and not everybody is that fortunate. Like PLI is like that. I mean, this is just the most amazing group of wonderful people, and we are surprisingly diverse. I just love that. I was going to ask you about where you see the future of AI in law libraries. It could be the court, maybe your court. Where do you think the future lies for your court?
I'm really curious. I don't know how much, because the research we do here is so nuanced. I don't know if the AI tools work very well for it. as they stand now or how long it will take for them to get better. I do think that the tools that help the user to analyze and summarize might be really useful in the courts. If you can speed up the process, I think that what comes to mind, and my concern as I say this out loud, is many of the district courts are flooded with cases. And if chambers can move through these cases more efficiently by using AI tools that help them to speed the process of reviewing briefs and reviewing pleadings and seeing things within those, that's wonderful. That advances justice, that saves expense, that is fantastic. On the flip side of that is just the obvious question of, can you trust? Can you trust the tool? And I think that these are probably the issues that people well above my pay grade at the courts are grappling with, is if the courts start using these, what are the potential repercussions and what are the backstops? I think the interesting thing that I never realized about working in the courts until I came to work in one was, when you work in a firm or in many legal professions, you're trying to find authority that supports your position. And through that process, obviously, to be a good advocate, you also want to find
the opposing,
but you don't have to. It's right. And so, but in the courts, it's really, really essential. Like, okay, we've read your take, and now we need to figure out what is the law, but might circumvent the ability of the user to get to that level, to like, not just I found an answer, but I found the best answer. Exactly. And that's a process of labor. It's iterative. It's, and every judge I've spoken to seems to approach this process a little bit differently. Like their chambers' procedures for reviewing briefs and drawing up opinions, et cetera, depend in many ways on their workload and what their styles are. But I think that my fear would always be that we rely on a tool that is blind to something that we should see. And we won't know that unless we also do the work ourselves, in which case did the AI tool save us time?
Right.
So, I think it's a really interesting question. I'm not sure how this will play out, but I know that people here care a lot about these issues.
Yes. I appreciate this discussion because you've identified a couple of things that are really useful and really interesting about AI. A couple I mentioned already, but you've said, if we use it in the courts, or it's used in the courts to review and to summarize and to search for things, identifying patterns is a big deal. It's supposed to be very good at identifying patterns, better than we are, because it can look at a lot of things much more efficiently than we can. And also, I was hoping we were going here, access to justice. If the courts maybe not yours, but if the local courts, if the lower level courts moved more quickly and could get more people what they need, access to justice, that would be a wonderful use of it.
Yeah. Well, and regardless of what the courts think about AI tools are being used to try, whether it's wise or not, self-represented parties are using generative AI tools to help them with their legal pleadings. And I was reading it was this long article in the Wall Street Journal a few weeks ago about a woman who was best friends with the heiress of the Thomson Reuters fortune, who had invested a lot of funds on behalf of her friend in cryptocurrency and had lost lots of money. And they've been in litigation. And obviously, one of these parties has deep pockets and the other has no pockets. And she said she had been using ChatGPT to prepare for court things related to this lawsuit that she's
to generate
involved
the
in.
documents and the filings.
I'm really interested. I have not had my finger on the pulse of access to justice work as much lately as I used to. But when I was up in Connecticut, I know that the Connecticut Bar Association, the Connecticut Judiciary were working really hard at addressing access to justice in Connecticut. And I think that figuring out ways to use perhaps like a customized generative AI product to help a self-represented party to, complete their forms, to whatever. That it would be wonderful. And I think, yes, the potential that they can save time in chambers and help to smooth those things along, if they could help with case management and, and I got divorced a couple of years ago, and we were self-represented, and we went to the court, and the people at the court were so helpful. This was not in New York.
Well, I like to think they're helpful in New York too, but you were elsewhere, and they were lovely.
They were, they were incredibly helpful. We had filled out, I'm a trained paralegal. I know how to fill out forms, but I had made a mistake. They identified the mistake. They did not make us start all over. There was something that needed to be notarized, and they just offered to notarize it for us at the spot.
Wow.
Really, really, really nice. But
the
public's interactions with the court, I think, are not this court, but we are so specialized. We have, corporations who are represented by
big firms,
and they have people who deal with these things. So it's always interesting. This is a total aside, but my friends who are attorneys who worked initially in big firms, and then later on they moved to much smaller firms or even hang a shingle and run their own solo practice, talk about that it's really, they didn't realize how much work goes into the mechanics of practice of law, because when they worked at a big firm,
they were protected.
There were people who did all of that, the very precise rules for how briefs need to be formatted, and if you don't do it correctly, they get rejected. And or that you need 25 copies of this or whatever. That it's an interesting thing. But then you imagine the member of the public, trying to interact with this, and it's really hard. I know that courts who serve the public work really hard at being accessible. And I know that many of our colleagues who work in public law libraries spend a lot of energy, time, thought working on making all of these things accessible. If AI can help with that, that's fantastic. That if you can answer a bunch of questions and it can give you something, even if it should be reviewed by an attorney.
Exactly.
But it's also interesting because I'm aware of, when I went to paralegal school, one of my instructors said that lawyers sell two things. They sell their time and they sell documents. And so I think that there's always going to be a little bit of tension with the bar about incursions into their business. That, if we make it really easy for people to get those documents that they would normally purchase from an attorney out of a system that doesn't charge them anything or charges them a very low fee. But those have all we've been using LegalZoom now for years.
Form generators.
Form generators. When I worked at UConn Law, Darcy Kirk, our library director, had drafted a memo that we kept on file at the desk that was defining what we would do under the understanding of unauthorized practice of law.
Right.
And she had really narrowly circumscribed what we could do. So we could not read a statute over the telephone. We could not help someone fill out a form or select the form to fill out.
No, you can't tell them what to write.
Right, exactly. So someone would come and the form said first name. What do I write here? I'm sorry, I can't help you complete the form.
Right.
But please read the instructions.
Right. tough.
And that must sound like, I'm a user-focused person. Like, that's a very unsatisfying answer to give somebody, a limitation. But it is important, because if you direct them to fill out the form and they filled it out incorrectly and it gets rejected and they miss the statute of limitations, and then suddenly, well, that guy at the library said.
That's right.
So, yeah.
No, it skirts awfully close to that line, unauthorized practice of law. That is a real problem with librarians, with a lot of librarians.
It is.
Especially law librarians. Interesting. Can I ask you, what are the most important learnings that you would share with fellow law librarians, or what do you wish someone had told you? What do you wish you had known when you began as a law librarian? I mean, we have plenty, but if you wanted to touch on those, those are some of my favorite.
I feel like when I hear this question, I immediately think, like, what did I regret? And that's not the question.
No, but that's useful too.
And I regret nothing. So everything that's happened in my career has been an opportunity to learn. Where I'm at now, something that I wish is that I had pushed harder to go to library school earlier in my career. There were many reasons why I put that off. Some of it was literally, I am the child of a librarian. I had worked in libraries forever. There was a part of me that wanted to break out of this, that I wanted to do something else, even though I feel like this has been in my blood since when I was in high school, I was helping my classmates do their research and come up with topics for papers and things. It's like, this has always been part of me, but there was a part of me that resisted that and felt like it was prescribed, and I wanted
expected.
Expected, exactly. But interestingly, I mentioned earlier that I'm disabled, and my disabilities were identified rather late in my schooling, and I was a terrible student. And so part of the reason why I delayed library school for so long was because my undergrad GPA was so low that I could not get into library school until I had
experience.
Well, a lot of experience. Like, that was surprising, because I started applying to library schools when I was maybe 2011, 2012. I did a first round and was rejected by everybody.
Wow.
At that point, I'd worked in libraries for a long time already with a really good record. I then went and got my paralegal certificates, partially because I wanted to demonstrate that I can do school. And I went to a good paralegal school, and I got all A's, and I learned a lot. It was a great experience, and I think it really helped me professionally. But that wasn't enough credits to push me over that threshold.
Wow.
So then I just sort of got angry and shoved it aside. This is a long little detour on our conversation. But when I finally went back a few years ago, it was during the pandemic that I finally just sort of had this reset of like, let me try this again. And I pulled out all the stops. I got my best recommendations possible. I wrote the most amazing essay. I made sure my CV had everything on it. And I applied only to Syracuse University, and they offered me admission almost immediately. So that was wonderful.
Great.
I ended up transferring to St. John's for tuition remission. But I wish that there had been some way to overcome that earlier on. I think that it created some, I'm not an angry person. I'm like a very optimistic person, but I got angry with this system that seemed really convinced that I shouldn't be in it. And yet I was.
Yeah.
And so, it was even, I don't know if you've met Jocelyn Kennedy.
I think so.
Jocelyn is one of my favorite librarians in the world. She got so angry about it on my sort of second application process that didn't work. But I think that the upshot of that, though, was that along that process, I worked really hard. I worked with great people. I went to paralegal school, which I may have never done otherwise, which I think was, I would love to expand the idea that paralegal school is a good qualification for this field.
Yep.
You don't
because you learn so much.
JD is great, but paralegal school is a much lower commitment, but gives you a lot of exposure to legal concepts, legal practice, just that I think is really beneficial, that as we sort of face this reality of law library career that we don't seem to have good pathways into, that's one I would love to exploit more. That in the academic setting, I feel like people don't really know what to do with a paralegal credential in the law library sense, that it doesn't fit into
the traditional
rules.
path.
So firms and certainly the courts, I think that was helpful for me to get this job here. I think that it demonstrated an interest, commitment, skill set, awareness that
Absolutely.
they value. And so I hope that the law schools kind of get on board with that I realize that there are schools have written and unwritten policies around who can engage in credit bearing instruction. Many of them require a JD for that, but not all of the jobs in the library are teaching for credit.
That's right.
And even those, I would encourage my colleagues who are in these libraries to sort of give some strategic pushback to administrations about that, because I think that I've known some incredible legal research instructors who do not have a JD.
Right.
And I think that these are skills that you can learn in other ways that I would like to see. I'd like to see more opportunities for everybody.
That's a wonderful closing line. I would also like to see that. I don't know if you listened to Ellison Alifano's episode. She was a paralegal before she became a librarian.
I didn't. I don't think I heard hers yet.
No, it was early in 24. But yeah, she has a paralegal certificate as well. So yeah, all kinds of overlap. Well, Josh, I want to thank you. This has been a delight. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for having me. This has been lovely.
My pleasure. Yeah, it's so rare to get a chance to talk to somebody for a chunk of time without interruptions.
I love to talk library too. So.
Me too. So thank you for joining me.
Thanks for listening to the Practicing Law Librarian. Be sure to subscribe and listen to our latest episodes wherever you listen to podcasts. And to learn more about the Practicing Law Institute, please visit pli.edu. To learn more about PLI PLUS, which provides electronic access to the full collection of PLI Press publications, and schedule a demo with a member of our team, please visit pli.edu/plus. Please note that the views and opinions expressed during this podcast represent those of the individuals being interviewed and not necessarily those of PLI.